Live. Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends where you're coming in from. Welcome to another webinar in the Wiser series. We are actually going to have some rather interesting conversations today. I'm kind of geeking out about this one. We're going to talk a lot about scams, and we're actually going to talk about scams from the corporate side, the personal side, the human side, the pre, the post, and a shed ton load of stuff about the aftermath of these darn things. Amazing panel, totally awesome bunch of folks to kind of hang out with. And so I'm going to shut up at this point and let everybody introduce themselves. Ladies first, Victoria, if you would like to lead us away, if you don't mind.
Sure. My name is Victoria Thomas. I have worked in the cybersecurity awareness space now for about a dozen years or so, working across multiple industries, energy, manufacturing, tech, financial services, with companies that have a footprint across the globe, translating information into about 70 different languages for multiple organizations, for people up to about 250,000 people. So I'm glad to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're totally welcome. I'm looking forward to this one. Amy, you're up next, please.
Hi guys, I'm Amy Seitz. I am currently a global policy leader at Cardinal Health. They are a Fortune 15 company, which is very exciting for me. I've had an amazing opportunity to build out a couple cybersecurity programs at some smaller companies prior to this role, so that's been really, really interesting and fun. Lots of challenges and fun opportunities there. I'm also a proud mommy, and I guess I'm just really passionate on finding ways to help protect people.
Tim, you're up next. Amazing info. So please, after you.
Okay. My name is Dr. Tim McGinnis. I'm director and founder of an organization called SCARS. We are a government-registered online crime victims assistance organization supporting scam victims worldwide with affiliates and partners in 60 countries around the globe. I myself have been online on the internet for 40 years. Been monitoring and educating consumers about scams since '91. Not much has happened that I haven't seen or been involved in aiding victims of one way or another for the last almost 30 years.
Cool, awesome. And Gabrielle, sir.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this webinar. You know, it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I refer to it as the, online safety month, so that my mom can also relate to it. And this webinar today is all about scams, the victims. So it's a little bit different than what we do usually. And yeah, I'm really excited to be part of this.
Cool, thank you, sir. We're getting a little bit of feedback on somebody's microphone, just a heads up. I just a quick one so everybody can just quickly check on some stuff. So I think I kind of want to start this one off. There's so much to go through. There's the entire human life cycle. But for me, the human life cycle typically starts with, so yeah, there's definitely feedback. The human life cycle definitely starts a lot with how do we educate, how do we train, how do we teach, how do we do something about this one? And so for me, a lot of the training and teaching, especially in the adult side of the world, especially in the regular side of the world, obviously typically starts with the corporate side of things. Despite everything we're doing on the Wiser side, trying to educate normal humans and everybody else, it's a lot of it comes from the initial corporate education. So Victoria, if you wouldn't mind leading us off on that one, I'd love to know how corporate security and corporate training has evolved over the years, especially, I mean, you look at Tim's wealth of information that he has of, basically fighting this for the best part of 30 plus years. How much of that has been built into what you're now training people on doing these days?
Yeah, so the cybersecurity awareness space has definitely grown. A lot of organizations now understand that they have a responsibility to help train individuals on how to keep their information safe. And so it's now really evolving from phishing, just educating on phishing, to all types of emerging threats that's happening across across the world. And so with that said, I'm a marketing communications professional, as well as cybersecurity. And so I take an unconventional approach. Along with a lot of my peers, we're taking more of an unconventional approach to educate people and not just having the traditional computer-based training module that is compliance focused, where people have to take it once per year, but we're really trying to incorporate the learnings in micro modules through video, through funny campaigns throughout the year, so that people understand the role that they play not only at work in keeping themselves safe at work, but also what they can do to help keep themselves safe at home and when they're on the go. So a lot of companies are really beginning to take that approach, as opposed to a dozen years or so when I started, when it was just, hey, let's just take this, click here, click there type training module for about an hour or so, and then that's it for the year.
Tim, how are you seeing? Because I mean, you've obviously got a ridiculously amount of information on this one that works and that almost joins in with the stuff that like Victoria, Amy, and obviously Gabrielle are doing. Are you seeing where corporations are reaching out and trying to engage and involve and bring some of the statistics and lessons learned into more these days?
Corporations generally know. I have quite a bit of cybersecurity background in that I was DoD certified for many years as a certified certifier under various DoD cybersecurity schemas. The problem inherently is I equate this to driving. So the vast majority of people, when they go to take a driver's test, have to learn road signs and a basic stopping distance and a variety of factual pieces of information that actually do not translate to safe driving. So that fact-based learning is the foundation of almost all cybersecurity awareness training that I'm familiar with. So the problem inherently that we deal with is more than 1 million people fail a year. They become scam victims. So our approach is we go back into teaching, both as a mechanism to help them reestablish control in their lives, but also to look at the mechanics of how this actually happened. What was it in their brain that caused them, what was it in their brain that caused them to be susceptible to a scam? Things like stranger trust, various forms of built-in syndromes that we all suffer from. Confirmation bias is a perfect example of this. Our various kinds of biases that we encounter, our degree of belief in our own immortality and invulnerability. These are all factors that contribute. And once a victim understands these issues, then they're actually in a position to start looking at their behaviors and change it.
Got it. Yeah, I want to get to that stuff in a little bit, but I mean, go back to the conversation, go back to the question I asked, which is are more corporations, have you seen more engagement over the years, or what can corporations do to engage with you and the knowledge that you have and the teams that you have more effectively?
We do open our doors and offer to work with corporations that are interested in the subject matter and our research and our knowledge and experience. So that is given. But what we do see is there has been a vast increase in the amount of cybersecurity training, yet we don't see a significant success rate as a result of that training. Now, partly the scammers are getting smarter too.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely hit some of that conversation. Amy, from your side, you've obviously done the same, from the same thing, built up things, done stuff like that. How much have you seen that morph and evolve? And are you seeing from like the user's perspective, because obviously you've got a ton of work on the compliance side of the world. How are you seeing that work within the compliance side? Any increases, any changes from your side?
Yeah, I think there's some really great options out there that people can utilize and may not think of, right? So one of those options that people may not absolutely utilize right now are just building up those advocates, having partners in different areas of your business that can help support and help communicate any type of security risk, in gaining their their trust and just being a partner with them, building that relationship, and having those people help communicate that is just going to help drive the security training that they need to have. That's just a really good option.
Gabrielle, throwing it over to you. I mean, excuse me, I know what we do, so I'm interested in your perspective on this one. He says he chokes.
Yeah, sure. I think what needs to change and what I see is changing a little bit is that the industry needs to focus on people versus companies. Right now, we're still at a point where we're focusing a lot about the company, the information, that it won't get leaked. And I understand the logic behind it, but security culture starts at home. People behave the same usually at home and in the workplace. And what I believe at least is that if you really want to get to people, then you have to tell stories that are relevant to them to get them excited. People can get excited easily if it's related to them, if it's relevant to them, if they learn how to, secure their own social media accounts, for example. So, I usually tell companies, and we obviously work with a lot of companies, focus on the people, even though if it may not make sense immediately, talk about those personal things, because those habits of turning on two-factor authentication on your Instagram account will trickle into the company faster than you sitting and talking about the technicalities of how to protect the company. So I do feel this is changing. There's a lot of things that we can add on top of that, behavior science. We're going to talk a lot about that as well, talking about emotions. But just think like a marketer, honestly, reach to people, deliver a message, make it relatable. So if we as a security community, put our marketing hat on, I think we can reach a lot of people and deliver a very strong message that will actually have an impact on people.
So here's an interesting part on that one, which is, I'll pull a conversation from like Ryan and Evan that we've had on this one, which is we're still analog people operating in a much more digital world. I mean, we've all been in these industries for more and more years than I care to think of, longer than many of us. Get too much gray hair these days. And so it's become much more and more and more of a digital world as we go through things, which means our interactions have changed significantly over the years. I hope our training has changed. I hope the attitudes change. Are we seeing that people are thinking more effectively? Victoria, I'm going to throw this one back at you again, because you've got the view from the business side, and then Tim, I'll throw back at you. I'm really interested on whether people themselves are responding, because we're inundated with technology these days.
I think that's a really good question. I'm sitting here thinking about, we tell people that they are the weakest link, and then they want us to keep our company safe, and we want them to stay safe. But if we tell them what we want them to know, instead of making them feel guilty for making mistakes, then they're more apt to learn. And so with that said, repeat the question for me, just so I can make sure I incorporate my answer.
So it's more the human side. So part of it's the human side. We've obviously gone through some of the education, but the human themselves, how are they looking? How are they adapting? How are they learning? Because we really have been inundated with technology over the last, literally, this is probably weapon number one, the phone, the iPhone, 13, 14 years of this darn thing hanging around, and poor old Tim's running around like headless chicken because more and more people are falling for it.
So one of the things we have to do is incorporate what people are doing in their everyday lives. I incorporate a lot of gamification. That's how people learn. A lot of people, you have to understand your audience. Gabe was right. You have to know who you're talking to. That said, what channels to meet them on, because everybody doesn't learn the same. So you have to reinforce those messages as well. So I leverage a lot of gamified training to pique people's interest, and then to keep them engaged. I also leverage what Amy recommended, champions around the organization, to be my mouthpiece. And so people, when you have all this information coming at you from different ways, people do tend to get engaged. When you incentivize them, they get engaged, and it remains top of mind. So people, I think, are hungry to understand how to stay safe. Nobody wants to be the risk to the organization. Nobody wants their identity stolen. So people want the information. It's just a matter of us as cyber professionals figuring out how to get that information to them so that it sticks.
Tim, slightly different question for you, if you don't mind. We've talked a lot from like the business stuff. I'm intrigued. I mean, you obviously have a finger on the pulse on the scamming side of the world.
Right.
How much are you seeing the scammers and adversaries and attackers going after people's corporate world versus people's private personal world? I'm interested on that balance. If you've got any ideas or thoughts on that.
So we saw a significant uptick in BEC scams, business email compromise, and related scams in 2016, and it has been doubling year after year up until the pandemic hit. And then, interestingly enough, BEC scams essentially collapsed because when you're in a massive crisis, corporate America, small business, medium-sized business, everybody is micromanaging everything. So the opportunity for a disconnected employee to simply send a wire transfer because of a spoofed email has largely gone out the window. Communication in this era has had to expand and increase 100-fold just to maintain corporate operations.
Right.
Now, so as a result, this year especially, we saw a big shift into any kind of COVID scam that was even imaginable or possible. But we also saw, for the first time in 3 years, romance scams increased dramatically by 50%. So we're going to see 1 million new romance scam victims this year alone. And every other form of scam possible, from phone IRS scams, well, actually now they're more Social Security payments from the government kind of scams, but everything imaginable. We're still seeing lotto scams coming out of the Caribbean, various kinds of scams out of Latin America. Nothing has fundamentally changed, even though last year 111,000 scammers were arrested in 19.
Yeah. So sorry, go on, Tim, finish off.
I was going to say, yes, it has shifted from the business to the personal, but as soon as corporate America reopens and goes back to business as usual, it'll shift.
I'm going to be interested to see A, when, and B, what that landscape's going to look like in the future. I think we all are, to be perfectly honest.
Indeed.
Yeah, so this gets really interesting because it's something, I know something when I stand up on stage, we talk like it's January, it's time for the tax frauds, it's February, it's time for the romance frauds. And we talk about these cycles. And I know, Amy, you touched on it. Sorry, Victoria, you touched on that side of things. Amy, I'm interested in your thoughts on that one. As you build education awareness training programs out, how much do you take into account these ebbs and flows when you look for a training partner? And I'm not going to use Gabrielle as the example at the moment, but when you look for a training partner, how much do you look for those ebbs and flows as to how they can morph, how people are at risk more than just the business?
Well, yeah, you absolutely want to make sure that your training platform is up to date with the times, and as you know, threats emerge, you want the training to emerge as well. I think there's other opportunities as well as taking it not only with your digital training, but taking it into personal training. I used to do live training outside of digital training every Monday at an organization that I've worked with, and being able to sit in front of people and making it personal, making it real to them, having them take a sense of ownership to that situation, and just making them realize how what kind of impacts happen based on your actions, right? So a great story is, of a ransomware situation. It was a real story, and I was able to say, when you receive these emails, you really want to make sure that you're being judicious on what you're clicking on, right? Because, the organization had previously been hit with ransomware, and that organization's critical systems were taken down for 3 business days. And I said, do you want to be that person who clicked on that link and caused that business to be offline for 3 days? And because I was able to do that, and I was able to give that person that sense of ownership, it really drove home, and people really, it prevented them from clicking on things, and it also made them second guess a lot of those situations. And I think it's an opportunity to be a good storyteller.
Got it. That
Can I
makes
jump
sense.
in here for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Amy, I'm going to take you to task. You did exactly the wrong thing. You identified the individual and applied blame to them if they did something wrong. That's never to be done with a victim under any circumstances. Now, what would it do in the event that they had made a mistake? They would have tried to hide it because they didn't want to become subject to blame or ridicule of other employees. When you create a corporate environment where blame is the foundation of identifying a problem, and I'm not trying to really attack you personally, just to identify the error that was done in that. Gabrielle's approach to creating stories that people can buy into and have a sense of ownership around and become internal experts, so to speak, having learned about something that they can bring into the corporate workplace, that's the goal ultimately in doing this. When people feel that they're going to be retaliated against when they make a mistake, and they always will make that mistake, instead you create a hostile environment where people will be afraid to bring up things that they think they might have done wrong for fear of being identified and blamed for doing it. You want a collaborative environment.
I'm gonna come to Amy's defense on this one, because I know Amy, and I've known Amy for a while. Amy isn't one to actually sit there and go, hey, I'm gonna blame you for something.
No,
But
I know that.
using situations as an example as to, hey, here's something going on, here's how we would tackle this, here's what's happened, here's how we would tackle it. Unless I'm missing something, I think that was more the focus on that one. It's almost that situational awareness.
Well, it was the statement, would you want to be at blame or to blame for letting this happen within the company? That was the key statement there. So rather than saying that, it's about help us keep everyone's eyes and ears open, be aware, help your friends if they have a question, learn how this actually works and what our impulses are so that we can control these problems and everyone succeeds as a result.
Yeah.
See, that's a subtle difference there.
But I think at the end of the day, and I actually want to hit this one in a second, at the end of the day, we all click on something. You know, I love Win Schwartz. Win and I have gone backwards and forwards over the years, and Win's got the little stickers, don't click shit. And I love those stickers. But there is a snowball's chance in hell of that ever succeeding. Click responsibly. Now we can have that conversation. But at the end of the day, we are all susceptible. I almost fell for it the other bloody morning. I woke up to like hey, we need to validate this. And I got like partway through that first thing, and then the brain clicked in and woke up and had a cup of tea. And I'm like, WTF? And we're all susceptible at some point in time. And that to me is, and for me, that's where those examples have to be used, because we're all going to click on shit. No two ways about it. And this is, Gabrielle morphs the training on this one. Victoria's done the same thing. And I think Amy, I've got to be honest, I've stood up on stage and gone like, you're going to click on something and something's going to get breached. You don't want to be that person. So let's help you, let's help educate you. Let's help you not be the one that makes those mistakes. How can we help you as the human recognize this?
Yeah, and I would absolutely follow up with that to say that I don't, people, are not going to get retaliated against if something happens. You don't want that to happen. I was a very strong advocate of that, because we all are susceptible to those types of things. No one is immune. Even the best security people can have something like that happen. Nobody's immune for those types of situations. And I always begin to tell them that, and say, if something does happen, I'm a very empathetic person. So I was always encourage them, and I had success in that area. People very much came to me. I developed really good partnerships from that. So yeah, so I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah. And nobody wants to be a victim. about blame.
Well, so I want to hit this one. What the hell is it that makes us click? Why do we do it? What triggers this? Victoria, I'm going to hit you first, then I'm going to go to Gabrielle, then Tim and Amy. I want to hit this one. Why the hell do we still click? We've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. What on God's green earth still makes us click the wrong things?
It's curiosity. That's my number one answer. We're curious. You know, the old saying, curiosity killed the cat. That's what it is. You know, in some cases it's fear, but in most cases it's curiosity. And the cyber criminals know that. That's why they craft the messages that they craft. That's why they just a few minutes ago I got a phone call that said something on it. Of course, it didn't even have a number, but it was enticing for me to pick up the phone and just to figure out who it was. And so the cyber criminals know that, especially social engineers. And so they craft messages, text messages as well, to make us kind of just want to know, like, what's behind door number 3. And so that's why we click.
Gabrielle, same question. Why the heck do we still click
So,
stuff?
because we're emotional, you know, we're people. You know, the reason that, you know, we mentioned here that anyone can get scammed, because it has nothing to do really with our technical abilities. You know, come on, everybody can put their mouse over a link and figure it out. It's not like we have to be, you know, security experts for that or look at the email. But the root cause of why we clicked has to do with emotions, with us being people. So if we know, I think Tim mentioned that earlier, I think maybe when we were offline, or actually when we started, about bias. You know, if we were biased, then we tend to, you know, agree on something. We may click on something because of that, because we support it. So it has to do with, you know, anger, with greed, with all the emotions that people possess is what scammers target. So when we do the awareness training, I usually try to, you know, get to the root cause more. Like, what are the things that trigger us to take actions? Because it can happen to me. You know, if my kids were now at school, they're, you know, they're remote learning, but they were at school, and I would get a call from the nurse, I don't think I'm getting scammed at that point. I'm not, you know, I'm triggered in a different way. So it really depends on, you know, what are the things that trigger us, and it will continuously happen forever, but we can acquire habits that will protect us. And this is what training is about, changing behavior by acquiring habits that keep us safe.
Tim, give me some thoughts on this one. Same question. Why the heck are we still falling for it?
Gabriel's right. It's fundamentally based in behaviors, either bad or good. And that's the real problem. It's like, why do we still have car crashes? Cars are safer to drive than they've ever been. Why did it take 35 years for MAD to convince the world not to drive drunk? These are behavior changes we're talking about. And unfortunately, information alone doesn't change behaviors. That's why the military has boot camps, to profoundly change the psychology of people, to eliminate their thought processes that create vulnerabilities. In the corporate workplace, just information alone isn't sufficient. You have to teach people why they do the things they do, not just what not to do. So, for example, why do we trust people? There's a thing wired into us called stranger trust. There's a whole variety of psychological factors that, if we can identify them to people, they can think, aha. There are a lot of aha moments once you start really understanding why we do these things. And interestingly enough, it translates into the rest of our lives, because it's those same underlying emotional structures that influence every aspect of our lives, everything that we do that we identify wrong. Like, why is it easier to lie to your wife than to tell her the truth? These are all just sort of knee-jerk reactions, when in reality, if we'd have just thought about it, the easiest thing is to do the right thing.
So again, it comes back to that thinking about it. Somebody just put up there, stop think, and react on that one. And it's, some of the scams are amazing. I mean, just if you played the scam out in reality, somebody comes up to your door, knocks on your door and goes, hello, I've got a suitcase full of money in the back of the car. Can I borrow $500 so that I can actually go make a key so that I can get into the boot of the car? You'd smack them upside the head. I'd set the dogs on them, for crying out loud.
Right.
But in the digital world, back in this analog human, in the digital world, we do that, and we don't take those 5 minutes to think the thing through in the human world. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because we don't all have the little voice on the side of our shoulder that talks to us that way, or the ones in the head. But to me, this is one of those biggest things. And I mean, I think this, so I want to move this on, and there's still some feedback somewhere.
Yeah, I wanna hit this just for a second. When I was a kid, I used to hang out on the street. There was no iPhone or internet, and I learned to spot trouble and walk away. The thing is that today, like you said, if somebody would have said, knock on the door, I have $500, because they have, money to give you. These are things that we know to spot, because as creatures, we were, built in a way where we use our senses to see that. But in the cyber world, it came to our rooms, into our houses. Trouble is there and we just can't see it. So we have to do those exercises that you suggested, for example, and just, use some other senses. Talk it, just say it loud. Does that make sense? Because then when you speak, suddenly it sounds weird. So you simulate real life. That's all it is.
Victoria, hang on a sec. I want to give Victoria some thoughts on this one, because obviously from, again, looking at the mass of training people that we're trying to influence, I mean, it's not just ones and twosies. We've got 7 billion people to try and figure out how to actually try to get some of this through. Victoria, how can we help people understand this in such a way that we take the digital attack and turn it into something human?
Well, I'd like to think that, unfortunately, people falling victim is one way for people to understand that this is real and that they need to do something differently. Their behaviors need to change. But I also think understanding that threat landscape, and then understanding that the people that we're trying to educate, and when you understand that landscape, and then you understand that audience that you're trying to train, you come up with the best method for educating them, and then reinforcing it over a period of time until you see those behaviors change. And so with that, though, you have to make sure that you're capturing the right data to be able to make the right adjustments to your training or to your education.
So you hit a human thing, and Tim, I want some thoughts from you on this one as well, from the psychology side of things. As humans, we unfortunately don't always seem to learn until something happens. Perfect example is when we're kids. You get taken into the kitchen with a parent or guardian. Don't touch the kettle, it's hot. Don't touch the stove, it's hot. What do? Touch the ruddy thing. We learn through those experiences. Yet on the side of me, I've got Tim and a lot of other people yelling at all of us, going, look, there's going to be 1 million romance scams this year. There's going to be all of this stuff going on. And yet as humans, we keep going blindly for, oh, it won't happen to me. I'll never fall for that, until we go off the edge of the darn cliff. How the heck do we stop that? I just
our psychology.
Go for it, Tim. I'm up for this one. You got a minute.
By understanding our psychology and the reasons why we do it. It's that simple. So as a cybersecurity professional, there's 2 initial things that you got to understand and look them up. One is called stranger trust, and it affects every part of the organization. It isn't strictly a cybersecurity issue. The second is confirmational bias. If you can get those 2 down and get your organization to really understand them corporate-wide, it'll solve sales problems, it'll solve marketing problems, it'll solve accounting problems, logistics, warehousing. and also cybersecurity problems.
Right, that's a huge one. Amy, thoughts on that one? I'm intrigued to see, like from your standpoint, if you hit those before, or thoughts on integrating that kind of stuff, and how do we deal with that?
Well, for me, I think, if you go back to why people, do the things they do, there's different levels of elements. I've seen on side the reason people sometimes they do things is just because they're in a hurry. So when I worked in an environment once where people were on the go, right? They're using their mobile devices all the time, and you'd get, somebody just trying to engage in a conversation, right? This is how the scam works. And you're like, hey, how's it going? You just respond, hey, what's going on? It's from a bigwig from the company. I'm going to respond to this really, really quickly. And they're just trying to engage in that conversation to reel you in, right? And then they get you, and they're like, I'm in this meeting. I have to get this done really quickly. And of course, that's when the scam happens. And of course, we should be trained to identify that that's what's going on. The other thing too is I think that people have the natural ability to want to trust. People's first instinct, I don't think, is generally not to trust a situation. I think we're raised as in our childhood and infancy to trust in the good and things. And so that's why I think that's just a opportunity for us to be more educated in identifying different situations.
All right, so
Something quick
all right,
regarding that?
you go quick.
Yeah. So I think it also has to do with culture in general, because the culture in America and other places is, you do what your boss tells you, in many places. You want to do it quick, you want to do it, perfectly. And that sometimes doesn't go hand in hand with, cybersecurity that says, slow down, question your boss, ask, like, did you actually meant for me to do this? So those things collide. And I think the organization needs to create an environment where they tell the staff, the team, if you think that I didn't send it, question me. That's fine. I'm okay if you slow down, as long as we're also doing it safely.
Got it, understand it, like it. I'm assuming that a bunch of that is put in. My challenge with any of that stuff, and this is where I think I want to get into this next piece, is especially with an older population. I mean, the couple of the folks I'm dealing with on the scams at the moment, they don't question authority. They've maybe left the workforce, which means in theory, unfortunately, a lot of them have a nest egg. It's very easy to go after. The scams are definitely set there, and it's an authoritative type of attack against them that they won't question it. They've been brought up not to question it. That generation has been brought up to basically, when the director of the FBI calls you up and says you will do something, gosh darn it, all the heck, you will bloody well do it, and you won't question it. And the attackers go after that. So what I'm trying to figure out is, how do we do that? One of the questions came in is, how do we drive the psychology of experience? How do we help people understand that? And how do we actually help people who are in scams? That's Tim. I'm after some thoughts on this one, because so many people are in scams, are in this world. How do we help them as human beings? How do we help them as co-workers? How do we help them as family members? How do we help them?
Well, there's different stages to that question. So
okay.
The first part is, when someone discovers that they're in a scam, they're going to go through a set of traumatic experiences immediately. And those traumas can be very profound. And they can be as profound whether they're in the workplace or whether they're scammed in private life at home. And that trauma can be as severe as the PTSD from a returning service member.
Right.
The result is that you've got that to deal with. So we give them a set of 3 steps that they have to engage in immediately, both to essentially close the door and regain immediate control in the process. Close the door, report the scam to law enforcement, and begin the process of learning. Now, we granularize the psychological aspects of this. I have a degree as an anthropologist, so I approach it from that perspective. We help them understand these component psychological characteristics, because if they can actually understand, aha, I see that in myself, and now I can see it, I can fix it, I can change my behavior. So there's about 50 major psychological elements that are part of a well-engineered social engineering scam. If you can get people to recognize those, they can become immune to scams largely going forward. And most scam victims will actually be scammed many, many times.
Yeah.
Be scammed over and over and over because they have not addressed any of the root problems that cause them to be scammable. So that's that process that we go through. We're dealing with psychologies, we're dealing with trauma, we're dealing with a learning environment that helps them work through this. Recovering from a scam is usually a multi-year recovery.
Right.
It's severe as substance abuse, and it can result in severe PTSD for the victims.
Do me a favor. You said one word, close the door. Give me 30 seconds on what do you define as close the door?
Okay, a scam has occurred. Let's say it's a relationship scam, typical social engineering scam. They've been in contact with a scammer using multiple mediums, email, text, WhatsApp, phone, whatever the case may happen to be. So they have to block and cut off all contact. Absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts. Block the phone numbers, block the email, block WhatsApp. If they've got an account on Hangouts, delete the account. Lock down their Facebook profile to the extent they can. That's how you close the door, so that you, A, are not allowing the scammer to communicate with you, but also equally importantly, don't open an email if you see it that got through for any reason. Don't read the new messages.
And again, to your point, this is for those of you that do or don't know, there's a whole bunch of stuff online. Tim, you've probably got some stuff as well. I did a series with McAfee years ago that was called Stop H Commerce, and we dealt with Janella. Janella, amazing lady, just absolutely freaking amazing person, got taken for the best part of $500,000, like 400 and something or thousand. And it's a machine. It was a machine that she was being taken through, and you block one, you cut off one head, 3 others arrive. You cut off those heads, and no matter what the story was, they fell for it, and no matter how many different times and how many different ways. And I see that, and we all probably see that so often. Shutting that door is to me part of it. How do we then address how do we address the individuals themselves? How do we help them? Tim, before I hit you on that one, again, Victoria, I want to go back to you, because obviously you've got the education and awareness on one side of it. Do you, or does the corporation get involved in anything to like help people once they've been a victim of the scam? That's more of a question than a, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, I don't personally, at the personal level, help people, but we do give them the tools in case they do fall victim. So we give them proper resources for what they need to do external to the corporation if they should fall victim to a scam. If they do fall victim to a scam internally to the organization, then we give them the steps on what they need to do to notify someone that they have fallen victim.
Is that much more of a collaboration? So again, one of the things in InfoSec that we've not been good at doing is collaborating. Is that where you collaborate with like HR, with external resources and everybody else more effectively?
No, I've not had opportunity to do that. A lot of organizations don't really want to get involved at that level if somebody's fallen victim, but also organizations don't want to get involved with, and when I say that at the individual, at the personal level, organizations also don't want to get involved with, telling people, they try to stay as agnostic as possible and not, pointing people to, hey, use this tool for a password manager or use that tool. This is best. So a lot of organizations try to stay out of that, but we do provide them the proper resources in case they do fall victim at a personal level.
Because I mean, this is where I think, and tell me I'm wrong on this one, or Amy or Victoria, tell me I'm wrong on this one. This is where I feel like companies could step up more. You've got organizations like Tim's, like others out there that are trying to do some amazing work for victims. for me, I mean, you look at what Tim's saying, you got 1 million people are going to hit romance scams. You know darn well inside the organizations that you're helping, responsible for, working for, some of those victims are going to be inside there, and they're sure as hell aren't going to want to put their hand up. They're sure as hell aren't going to want to seek help half the time, and some of them might not even know they're in it. So for me, could companies step up more and not just do, hey, I'm going to help train you how to avoid and how to do everything else, but I'm going to put some kind of I'm going to put some kind of help in place. I mean, we put help in place for other psychological challenges and issues that people have. We put care in place. We put people to help. We put all sorts of place in place for mental health. But to me, to Tim's point, this is also a mental health thing. Could we do more? Could the companies do more? Amy, give me some thoughts, and then Victoria, I'm going to come back to you, and then Gabrielle, I'm going to hit you.
Okay.
Well, absolutely. I think companies always have the opportunity to do more, right? So, at one of my positions that I worked with, I had the opportunity of creating some consumer awareness materials. So you're posting out on your website some materials for them just to be aware of some situations that were going on, right? But not only that, I've also created some information that had to go into a disclosure package. So we know that there's a lot of wire transfer fraud going on right now. So if you're in the home buying situation, you're kind of forcing people to read about the scam that could potentially happen to you when you put it in with the disclosure package, right? And you're going over that with those individuals. And I think for companies that aren't doing that, that's a really good opportunity, because at that point you're required to share that information with them, and hopefully you can make the scam a little bit more significant to show them that this is really important. You need to be aware, because it doesn't affect the organization, it affects the consumers, and they can be out of a lot of money, and that's really, really unfortunate. So absolutely, companies have an opportunity to do things like that and set up hotlines, like you said. I think that would be an amazing idea, Chris.
Yeah, Victoria, thoughts on this?
And I think at the employee level, I think organizations can approach that from a benefits perspective. So getting HR involved and saying, okay, what can we do should our employees fall victim, to a scam? Maybe have monitoring on their credit report, and the company pays for it, for a certain amount of time. I think that could also be packaged in from a benefits perspective for employees, and I think that would be really attractive.
And Tim, I mean, without you blowing your own trumpet, which you're very, very capable and you've got all rights to do, you've obviously got a ton of information that could be shared with the individuals inside companies to go, look, here's how you can help people, here's what they can do, here's how they can recognize. I'm sure that you've got all that exists.
Indeed we do. But let me give you one thought why you should do it and be as intrusive as you can be, because we talk about insider risks, right? A victim who's lost $500,000 to a scam, what is that employee going to be doing inside of your company? Now, we have an analytics and survey department. 1 in 10 relationship scam victims admits that they have either been tempted or have in fact embezzled from their workplace.
Okay, did not see that angle coming. Did not see that
angle
coming.
They're suffering from mental illness, trauma. What are they going to be as an employee? Certainly not productive. But also, if they're a crime victim, counseling is free. It's provided by the Department of Justice in every state in the country. So there are resources that are available if the organization is willing to look at it.
I love this. This is, this is fantastic, because I think, Victoria, to your point, being able to put it into the benefits, because we have, to your point, we have counseling. I mean, there's counseling available within benefits packages. Adding something like this in, because again, we're analog humans, and we're surrounded by so much digital stuff these days that we've got to step up and look in a different direction or add into it. Gabrielle, any thoughts on this one? I'm thinking, my brain's ticking over some more webinars and some more things that we could put out on this one. This is fantastic.
Yeah, so the insider threat angle is very true. This is something that I've been dealing in for about 14 years. So Definitely, it can start with, personal scam. I think, both Amy and Victoria mentioned about, the benefits. And I think it's a huge opportunity for the company to build this security culture. So I would promote that. And I think for people, it's very important to know that they're not alone. Because when people, become victims, they don't know who to reach out to. So like the first thing they will look for is like, who do I talk about this? And I think this is very, very important. Just even letting them know that this exists, and if something ever happens, you have somebody to talk to. I think it's very important both for the victim and also for the company from an insider threat, because we see a lot of insider threats. Eventually, when they're exposed, these people go to jail. Like, it should have been stopped earlier, but they didn't know who to reach out to. So I think it's a really great opportunity to create this security culture inside the organization.
Yeah, I mean, that really ties it back. I mean, that's a huge thing. Somebody else just pointed out, and I've forgotten who it was because I answered the message, so I apologize. And it's something I know I've taken advantage of, which is, it ties into Tim's stuff and it ties into Amy and Victoria's side of it, which is, we all know that insider threats are very, very prevalent, very, very real, and a number of bought passwords from people that are willing to sell them. Now, if they have just gone through scams, if they have just lost a bunch of money, that becomes much easier to buy that password for, couple $100,000. I mean, it's cost us a couple of times. We spent $1,000 or a couple of $1,000s on passwords before to get us into systems inside companies when I've been red teaming them, including .mil and .gov side of the world. So it isn't just the civilian side of the world. All right, so we are getting close to the bottom of the hour. We have covered a bunch of things. We have a lot of stuff to cover. I want to go through some of the conversations on stuff on this one. Here's something. We obviously see a lot of stuff coming from social media sites. Basically within the workplace, outside of the workplace. Is there anything that we can do as individuals and companies as well to recognize more and to help more on the social media sites? The scams coming from, the awareness coming from, and the recognition coming from. I'll throw that open. Anybody got any thoughts on that one? Go for it, Tim. You're up first, and then we'll go around.
One of the things that the cybersecurity department of every company should be doing is getting a list of every social media profile for every one of the employees, and doing an audit on that for the employee and the company's benefit. To make sure that there's no information leakage occurring through social media, but two, that the employee has appropriately locked themselves down so that nothing is visible that a scammer can use to leverage to perform a social engineering scam, like a BEC scam, using spear phishing as a technique.
Yeah, that's I can't.
At what
Yeah, I know where this is going. I can't disagree with that because I've used it effectively in the past, but I can disagree with it because now my private life and my personal life and my business life have just done that. And so there's one part of me which goes 100% in agreement, especially .mil.gov world, but there's also a part of me that's like, oh, hell no. Hey, Victoria, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. At what point do we cross the privacy line? And, at what point do we say, hey, you're my employer. You don't need that type of information about me. And I think it depends on the role that you have in the organization. So based on your role, depends on how much information that you have to disclose to the organization. I think it's a great idea. I just think it's crossing some privacy lines, especially when you get into, Europe, where they're really, where they don't play that. So we have to consider.
I love the idea about role-based. I think role-based and rule-based is a perfect way of doing it. And I'm actually with Tim because I've used this. I've gone on to, you go onto Craigslist or you go onto the forums and people are talking about work-related stuff. They use their work email rather than personal email. We as society have blended that world together, but we still want to retain that level of separation. I mean, we use it for threat intelligence. That's part of my world is we've used it for threat intel to build it to help companies. but it really is a sticky mess because you're right. From Victoria's standpoint, it's like, hey, we've got to have some separation, especially GDPR side of the world. Tim, I know where you're coming from because it closes down those, or it tries to close down. I think awareness comes into that ton as well. Yeah, there's no flipping easy answer on that one, unfortunately. Amy, any thoughts? Gabrielle, any thoughts on that one?
I was just going to say, it's a good idea if we're motivated by trying to help our employees by, allowing them the opportunity to lock down their sites, right? But in the privacy world, we call that a slippery slope,
Yes.
So, again, I agree that, our intentions are that we want to help the employee, but at the same time, we might be crossing a little bit of a slippery slope there.
But I think to the point, I think it depends. I mean, if you're in IT or InfoSec or senior on the finance or senior leadership or something, I think there needs to be coaching, absolutely coaching on what you shouldn't. I mean, we have it on HR.
Yeah.
I should be coached on what I can and can't say. The same thing I should be coached on what I can and can't put on the freaking internet, or what I shouldn't put on the internet, and then checks and balances in place.
As a policy writer, you should absolutely have a social media policy. So that's an opportunity for a starting ground, but you just don't want to write something, right? You want to socialize it, communicate it, have advocates for it, have some training, those types of things. But having a good social media policy is probably a good start.
How many companies, if you were to take a rough guesstimate, how many companies do you think have that as a percentage?
Oof, I'm not sure.
Do you reckon we're out of the teens, more than teens, less than teens? Anybody?
It probably depends on
depends
on the industry, because some industries require it.
It's a small number.
Yeah, I got a feeling it probably is. I mean, let's face it, so many companies don't even have decent policies and procedures or controls. We'd recognize that when shit hits the fan and they were like, hey, where's your IR plan? And like, we were getting around to doing one of those. All right, we are hitting the bottom of the hour. I would love final thoughts from people if you don't mind. It has been an amazing conversation. I know we haven't gotten to half the stuff. We might have to reconvene this one if everybody's up for it. All right, I'm going to reverse the order on this one. Gabrielle, you lead us off on final thoughts.
Sure. So I think, some people talk about, many people talk about, employees being the weakest link. Some talk about employees being, the company firewall. But I think if we think about people like a neighborhood, neighborhood watch helps to identify criminals, if people notify each other. So if we educate people and help people to spot those things and notify others and create this community where people care about each other, I think this will go a long way. And I also think we need to remember that cyber criminals think like marketers to some degree. Like scammers can use ads, they can use social media. So even though we many times focus on like phishing simulation because it's easy, we need to look at things on like I said, on a personal level, on social media, on even Google Maps, ads, everywhere that I, as an advertiser, can post something and get people to click, scammers can do that as well. So we need to remember that.
Got it. Tim, final closing thoughts, please, sir.
Well, the first thing that every individual needs to understand is that bad things are going to happen. And more importantly, that they know that there is some place that they can turn to when it does happen to both understand what occurred and how to recover from it. That's what my organization does, Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, SCARS. We also publish a global cybercrime, specifically scam reporting platform that provides live feeds to law enforcement agencies around the world, and that's at anyscam.com.
Cool. That's huge, and I encourage everybody to kind of keep an eye on do their stuff. All right, Amy, final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I follow up with that. I think it's really important to have those resources to be able to know what to do. But I also think that to Gabby's point, if if you know what to do, you know, if you have the ability to help somebody, then you have the responsibility to help them, right? And sometimes, especially with some of the older crowd, you just need to maybe just take their hand and walk them through that situation. You know, it is, we like to call it a hand holding. And we should just do that. Take some extra effort and help those that may not truly understand it, or may be pushing back a little bit, and just walk in that journey with them.
Yeah, I think this goes back to it drives me nuts when I hear, you know, people are the weakest link, people are problems between the chair and the keyboard, all that shit. It pisses me off because at the end of the day, they're your best asset. They are your first line of defense, and we should help train them and teach them. So to me, that's one of those big things. Victoria, closing words, please. You can close it out for us.
Sure, thank you. You said it best. People are the first line of defense. I actually like to say that people are our best line of defense because we can have technology in place. But if people don't know how to leverage that technology, if they don't understand what the technology is there for, then we've just spent a whole bunch of money on something that a human could mitigate. So just make sure that people understand cybersecurity at the most basic level. I try to educate people almost on a 4th, 5th grade level as far as cybersecurity goes. You know, don't take into account just because somebody might be younger that they get it. Everybody, you need to understand the people who are using the technology or the people who are being targeted. And as Amy said, hold their hand, walk them through it, be patient with them. And if they make a mistake, just show them where they made a mistake so that they don't make the mistakes again.
Cool. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Absolutely fascinating conversation. We skimmed across so many different areas. I'd love to delve into this a lot more, everything from the pre, the actual, and then the post and all the other stuff. There's crazy amount of knowledge and information here, and I thank each one of you for being on this. This was gratefully appreciated. To the audience listening, thank you very much for everybody being here. This has been another WISE training webinar, and I look forward to doing another one of these in a couple of weeks. Please, everybody, stay safe, stay healthy, have a wonderful Halloween and all that good craziness, and I look forward to catching up with everybody online. Goodbye, and thank you very much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.